Good afternoon, and you're very welcome to today's meeting of Rotary Kilkenny, the first in our new Rotary year. We're delighted on this occasion to welcome the newly appointed Minister of State at the Department of Housing, with responsibility for both electoral reform and heritage, Malcolm Noonan TD. Malcolm is well rooted in Kilkenny. He's one of a family of 10, and indeed I got to know him first actually through his father Derry, who is a landscaper and indeed was working up to very recently as a great landscaper around Kilkenny. Malcolm himself grew up in the hallowed halls of James Stephens Military Barracks, and indeed he has as strong a connection with there as we in Rotary have. He was elected as a member of Kilkenny County Council in 2004 and served as a member of the council until his election as TD in February of this year. He was also Mayor of Kilkenny as a member of Kilkenny Borough Council in 2009 up to 2010, where he drove an ambitious policy-driven agenda. Before his work in politics, he had a whole other life as both a community and environmental activist. He was a director of Friends of the Earth Ireland, and he's been a key activist in the environmental movement throughout the country. He contested the leadership of the Green Party in 2011 following John Gormley's resignation, and he's held a number of portfolios within the Green Party. He was spokesman for environment and is currently spokesperson for local government and community and rural affairs. At least he was until his appointment as Minister of State in the last week. His professional work has spanned many diverse areas. He's been a graphic designer, a landscape gardener like his father, a community educator, and in recent years I got to know him particularly in Ossory Youth, where he worked as a project worker with the Kilkenny-based Suicide Prevention Project, where he led and steered the development of the first county suicide prevention plan, a template for which has now been replicated across the whole country. His academic background is in graphic and industrial design, and indeed in rural development. He's a musician as well, and he's taken a long and happy tenure in both the arts and culture of Kilkenny. He's had the privilege of playing in some influential bands throughout the years. In his personal life, he's married to Jenny, who's a childcare practitioner, and he has 4 children, Colm, Tristan, Stephen and Kitty. Malcolm, you're very welcome to join us this afternoon.
In the short term by the new government, but plus in the long term as well. It's a very ambitious local authority in Kilkenny, and I was really amazed at the volume of projects. And just in the motorway service station in Bagnallstown now, or Paulstown, having come back from visiting a primary school in Bagnallstown, where they have an amazing outdoor area for wildlife and biodiversity and growing food, and they're looking at trying to adapt their outdoor space for an outdoor learning environment, really a covered outdoor learning environment, to deal with the challenges that schools are going to face post in this COVID era. So that I hope to be able to bring that project to the Department of Education for support. And then we have a joint policing committee meeting in the afternoon to meet, and then a meeting with my department officials later on this evening. So it's a busy first full day of activity in my new role.
Yeah, wow. One of the issues that was, I suppose, controversial about your appointment was the move to the Department of Housing for some of the issues that, for example, on Tashka, Birdwatch Ireland, and the fact that you're looking after the National Parks and Wildlife Service. It seems to me to be a logical move, but it has reached, it was controversial, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I think the initial reaction that had emerged from the NGOs was that first of all, that this was a downgrading of the Heritage Department out of its previous home in arts, culture, and Gaeltacht, and they thought that with that there was going to be a downgrading of and a splitting of the NPWS from the heritage section. But actually, what happened, having met with departmental officials and the Assistant Secretary General last week, was it's gone in its entirety, and not just that, we would hope to take on the provisions for the Water Framework Directive and the Marine Protected Coastal Areas as well. So it's actually if anything, having spoken to Birdwatch Ireland and spoken to Virginia Teagan in the Heritage Council this morning, there seemed to be now, I suppose, a relief there that actually they have a Heritage Minister that really has a feel for the sector and very much a grow for the sector and has been deeply immersed in it for many years. So I think a lot of those fears have been allayed. And I think subsequent to that, statements have come out from the Irish Environmental Network
Yes.
and from Watch welcoming the appointment. So I also think added to that, we now have within the Green Party, in terms of the partnership around the programme for government, two senior, we have Eamon Ryan's department, which is environment, including the EPA, and Pippa Hackett, who takes on a super junior role, a seat at the cabinet table without a vote, but specifically related to land use and biodiversity. So if anything, I think it actually covers a whole broad section around nature and having nature with a very strong voice at the cabinet table. And I think that is to be welcomed.
Very much so. But it also indicates to me that organisations often rush to judgment before they examine the detail. And this is something I suppose that politicians have to get used to, is that people jump to a conclusion before they've actually read all the detail.
Without doubt. But I also would be of the view that this is a sector, the NGO sector in particular, that has reason to be sceptical, because historically underfunding of National Parks and Wildlife Service, of the environmental NGOs, all of that has led to, I suppose, an undermining of their own capacity to do their work, and morale is quite low in the sector, I would say. While the arts was received, and quite rightly received, a boost of 20 million from the outgoing government, the heritage sector has received nothing. And so my first task would be to battle with my senior minister, Darragh O'Brien, for the July stimulus package to ensure that the heritage sector, in particular the National Parks and Wildlife Service, is given sufficient funding to manage the trails, to manage the parks and the 6 national parks that are under their care, because people might not be aware of the fact that all these parks stayed open during for most of the restrictions that have been in place, and our park rangers are effectively essential workers because they're there managing the parks and managing wildfires, managing other issues that are going on, antisocial behaviour, etc. So I would like to see that the July stimulus package would reflect the needs of the sector as an immediate ask to try and help them adapt to these whole new changed set of circumstances that we're in.
You mentioned there, Malcolm, that you have to negotiate with the minister, Darragh O'Brien. He's from a different political party. You're relatively new to the Dáil. How do you develop relationships with people, first of all, from a different political party, but also people that may not fully understand your brief?
Yeah, really good question, Ian. I have to say that, okay, from the outside, the talks may have looked painstaking and trundling along at a snail's pace, but I think they did some good in the fact that we got, it helped us to develop interpersonal relationships with those of the other parties. And it was really difficult to do because, you're social distancing, you're going to have maximum 2-hour meetings, but we got to know each other. And I think that's, one thing I think I certainly know from politics is that much of it is about building up relationships with people, be it at a political level or departments or lobby groups or constituency groups. I think that's really important. And last week, I think two of the things I did last week was, after my appointment, was to meet with my senior officials in the department, and then to meet with my line manager, who is Minister Darragh O'Brien. And we had a fantastic meeting with him. Really, he pretty much said, this is not a hierarchical situation. This is a partnership. We're going to work together. And he's a fantastic guy. And I was really encouraged by that meeting. And
very good.
So I actually think, for all the talk of bringing Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael together, these are just people that ideologically we're not that far apart from each other.
Yeah.
I actually think there's a huge amount of commonality. And the Greens don't have the franchise on green issues. There's a lot of people in all of those parties that have a huge affinity and affection for nature and for wildlife and for to tackle climate change. So I think I think it bodes well for a good working relationship over the next number of years.
You've got your work cut out for you to bring some people who are naturally sceptical of the Green Party agenda and who see the Green Party as the bogeyman. And there are TDs who will milk that for all it's worth, not necessarily because they're against what the Green Party is doing, but to engender support for themselves.
Yeah, that's part and parcel of politics, and I meet the Healy Rays in particular of the Healy Ray party, and you can have great banter with them, and I think what they do in the theatre of the Dáil chamber is one thing,
yes,
and what they do outside of that is very different. Politicians of all parties have come to me, and independents offering help, offering support. I think. The one thing I've found in my very short time in the Dáil is that there is a commonality of purpose around all of us in politics, that we are doing the best for our communities. Whatever about the media narrative about about all of us being on the take or whatever, the reality is I think most people are in politics for the right reasons, and I do think that it's up to us, the Greens, to try and debunk some of the myths about us as well.
Yes.
We're not, it shouldn't be dictatorial. It should be collaborative, and it should be inclusive. And I think perhaps we've learned lessons in that regard ourselves too.
You have two primary roles in your new job. One is obviously heritage, which we've spoken about. The other is electoral reform. How does that? Is that likely to affect local government or the way national politics are run?
It should affect both. Again, I'm just reading through the briefing documents on it at the moment. So within the programme for government, there will be a number of referenda that
yes,
are proposed on around water, and water is a public utility or a public good, housing, the right to housing. There will be a referendum on the ability of the diaspora to vote in presidential elections, reduction of voting age, and there could be a number of others. Plus, there would be the directly elected mayors, perhaps to refloat the directly elected mayor for Cork and for Dublin and for Waterford, and the overseeing of the successful plebiscite around the mayor for Limerick. So
right.
All of that important work. There will be an interaction with local government and the local government minister in relation to boundaries and the movement of electoral boundaries to the boundary commission. So it's an expansive piece of work in its own right, and I'm again looking forward to that equally to the heritage portfolio.
Yeah, one of my colleagues here, Roisin, has put in a question. Is there a chance of rowing back on the abolition of the borough councils? This is particularly close to the people of Kilkenny and the city in particular.
It is, and again, it's something, Roisin, we would have fought for in the discussions with Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. Fianna Fáil very much backing us on it, but there was certainly not a pushback from Fine Gael on it. So there is some commitment around, because there is an Irish Planning Institute review of the municipal districts. So that could, at the very least, open the door for a broader discussion about the reinstatement of borough and town councils. The boroughs in particular, I felt very hard done by, because notwithstanding the civic history of a place like Kilkenny and the importance of the charters and the that continuum of local government spanning back to the 13th century, I do feel that there has been a loss of autonomy for the city and a loss of focus on the city. And I would still be of the view that we should be looking back to reinstate that tier of local government. We now have probably the most centralised system of local governance in Europe, and most underfunded. And it's really important that we perhaps at least give a consideration to it. So I would hope, Roisin, that there would be, at the very least, a discussion about it, looking towards 2024, to see at the very least strengthening the municipal districts and reassigning a more ring-fenced budget towards the cities, the urban agenda.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not just a political issue, but there's an economic aspect to it as well, because so much of Kilkenny drives the rest of the county. And the rest of the county, for all they think that Kilkenny gets everything and they get nothing, Kilkenny is needed to drive the communities in villages and towns throughout the county.
It is, there's no doubt. And, with all due respect, I think, the meeting I had with Colette Byrne and Tim Butler this morning, there's no doubt the ambition is still there for the city. But they have fantastic projects planned and really looking towards making Kilkenny mobility friendly, more cycle and pedestrian friendly. They have the one-way system in place, but their ambition goes beyond that. And I was quite impressed with the projects that they were putting forward. But at the same time, there's a political governance issue and that I think was really important from the where resources were allocated and that economic driver that you spoke about, Ian. That didn't happen by accident. I think the much of the success of Kilkenny was derived out of good governance, good political and civic governance of a corporation borough council for many, many decades. And I think I think that's where it really reaped the benefits of that up to the abolition in 2014.
Just looking at to see, in relation to heritage, Kilkenny's heritage is basically its economy. The economy of Kilkenny depends so much on tourism. All the businesses, even members of Rotary, who are involved in the hospitality industry, and heritage has brought us the visitors. Do you see? You have a national role. You can't be seen to act preferentially towards your own native city, but there are perhaps few cities or few towns in Ireland that have as much heritage as an economic driver as Kilkenny. So will that be difficult for you not to favour Kilkenny?
I'll always favour Kilkenny. I think there tends to be with some element of parochialism with all at governmental or minister of state level. So at the same time, I think Kilkenny has something unique to offer as a message and a story to other Irish towns. The way we've managed the built heritage in the city. I haven't always got it right, but I think in general, I think as towns look to reimagine themselves out of COVID, there was a crisis in our urban centres before COVID, but it's a deep crisis now. And I think Kilkenny has a story to tell that is an important one, that if we invest in built heritage on a continual basis, it will bear dividends. And we have to look at the future of our urban spaces, what they're for, about people living in them, spaces for young people. And I think that message could be hinged around Kilkenny as an exemplar for other smaller regional towns to follow. So while not overtly favouring Kilkenny, I should be, but I do think the story we have to tell is an important one. And I think that a lot of towns could follow Kilkenny's example.
Well done, yeah. Jason has a question in relation to the leadership contest within the Green Party. Is that likely to create any destabilisation, do you think?
No, I don't think so. It was unfortunate the timing of Catherine's announcement. I think that almost did destabilise the talks. But I think the fact that we're in government, there's a solid coalition, a majority there of about 12 votes. So I think I wouldn't be concerned about that. I'd be telling a lie if I didn't say there weren't challenges within the party, but perhaps that is reflective of the fact that maybe we've matured to become a serious political party, as opposed to, I think I would no longer consider us to be a small political party. We're now the fourth biggest political party in the state, and I think things like that, like the leadership challenge, are probably inevitable, and that shows ambition in one sense, personal ambition, but it also shows that perhaps that we're just another political party like all the rest. We're not, in a way it's a good thing, and it will spark a debate that around the future of the party that won't be bad. And in fairness, I see Catherine and Eamon working very well together, getting on very well together, and he probably expected a challenge at some stage, but
Yes.
the timing wasn't great.
Well, we've seen both Leo Varadkar and Simon Coveney work together, in spite of the fact that they were in opposition to one another when they were seeking the leadership of their party 4 years ago or 3 years ago. I think that the fact that the vote in relation to the programme for government was so high, 76% of all members, in spite of the chairperson and in spite of the members of the Dáil and in spite of the Northern Ireland chairperson, that it still managed to get 76% was a major testimony to the work that was done, obviously behind the scenes, the phone calls that were made, the meetings that were held with obvious social distancing or not, but it seems to have worked, and it showed, a great deal of maturity, I think, on the part of the people who might have joined a political party out of a sense of idealism.
Yeah, really good point. And certainly I felt that when we had those Zoom meetings with our members across the country, the one thing that was starkly evident that perhaps the no side missed, that they were joining the party because they wanted action on climate. And you won't get action on climate from the opposition benches. You simply won't. And I think that was reflected in the vote and the strong endorsement. I think of all the three parties, we probably had the strongest endorsement. The highest ask, highest bar to be set, but it was a huge endorsement, and I think that steadied the ship in terms of the other two government partners. And I think the lesson to be learned from that too was, in terms of political campaigning, it's about getting the vote out. So while the no side were busy on Twitter, we were busy on the phones, and we worked hard to get that vote out. But it was very much reflective of a maturity in our membership.
Yes,
that they know we're there to, if it costs us our seats in 4 years' time, well, so be it. I think if we achieve half of what we set out to achieve, I think we'll be doing very well.
Well, indeed. Politics is such a fickle art. You mentioned there that you'd like to see the government in place for the next couple of years. Three parties, all working together or separately. Do you think they will work together?
I do. Yeah, I do. Maybe I'm idealistic. That could change as obviously budget time. There's going to be a conflict. I do. I think, as I said earlier on, Ian, I think there's a good working relationship there. Eamon is there a long time in the Dáil. He knows all of his colleagues, as a lot of them are, and I think there's a real politic here too that we've come through, are still going through a very deep crisis. The economic shock is still unquantifiable in many ways, and I think there's a collective will there to do the right thing and make sure that we are not just seen to be working together, but are working together. So I'm confident that this will be certainly an interesting time, but there will be a good government there as I said, I think it's rock solid for 4 years at least.
Yeah. I was looking at your blog before I came on. One of the things you said on New Year's Eve was that you hoped 2020 would bring no change, that things wouldn't change in 2020. How wrong things could be.
Yes, how wrong things could be.
Yeah.
It's been incredible, hasn't it?
Hasn't it just? The high of the February election, followed by the immediate pandemic, followed by the programme for government. It's been a real roller coaster for you in particular and for your family.
It has, yeah. It's been, I think probably only now I can probably look back in retrospect, but even at that, it's been just life-changing for us all. And I'm just seeing it from a political eye.
Yes.
My family, the lads have been amazingly resilient and have had to put up with a lot, but have put up with a lot down the years too. They've adapted very well to it, and are very understanding of it. I think there's Kitty and Stephen, the two younger ones in particular. For them, they talk about politics, and we talk about politics at home all the time, and but maybe that's not such a bad thing for them.
Not at all. Yeah.
So I think it's, but I am still eternally optimistic that we can not just come through this, but come through it better and hopefully reimagine a whole different way of doing things. Here we are on Zoom. We should be having lunch in the clubhouse now.
Yes.
But at the same time, look at what the great work you're doing in Rotary. Jason briefed me on the bike scheme. Isn't that just amazing the way that's gone from a small initiative into what hopefully will be a national and international initiative. So I think there's so many opportunities out of this crisis that we can grasp if we have the willingness and the courage to do so.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Malcolm, for making the time available today. I know you still have to have lunch at some stage, and hopefully we'll be able to provide lunch for you at some stage during the next year when you might come and see us in person in the Clubhouse Hotel when we have our Monday meetings. Thank you very much.
I really look forward.
No,
thank you.
Look after yourself. Thank you again.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, Malcolm.